Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Friday Feast, a little update segment where I talk a bit about a feature or a system in Nightmare Kitchen, how I made it, why it's there, how other games may implement it, and other little nuggets of information that I've learned over my years of being a game dev. This week's topic is something I've already implemented in the game, but continue to work on just a little bit, and it's a complex thing that many first-person and third-person shooters have to get right, and that is bullets. I figured bullets were a great topic to talk about for Friday Feast because as a player, when you play first, third person, and other shooting games, it may seem relatively obvious what's going on when you shoot something on the screen and a bullet flies out, but as a developer, there's actually a lot more edge cases, optimizations, and other things that you have to worry about. In pursuit of keeping these Friday Feast videos nice, short, and digestible, I won't be covering every little thing there is to think about when it comes to bullets in your game, but I'd like to cover some typical edge cases and other optimization problems that arise quite frequently. Now let's tackle the first common problem, which is choosing where to spawn your bullet from. And there's a couple different viable answers, and each one comes with its own set of difficulties and also niceties. I'm going to go over the two most common options that I've seen, which is spawning from the center of the camera or spawning from a physical barrel transform on your gun in the world. One difference between the two is colliding with an enemy that happens to be between the camera and the gun. Well, when you spawn from the center of the camera, you don't have to worry about it, whereas when you're spawning from the barrel of the gun, you now have to do an extra collision check to make sure you're not missing things that you should be hitting. Conversely, choosing to fire from the barrel of the gun works really well in a situation like this, where you want hip firing into an obstructed obstacle to collide, whereas aiming down the sights with the same exact camera position does not collide. Another benefit to firing from the barrel instead of the center of the camera is that you get to keep your projectile/collision object and your graphics object on the same thing, whereas the camera method, you're going to want to split those up because having the graphics coming out of the center of the camera looks very weird, so you need to have a separate graphics object that looks like it's coming out of the barrel that matches the speed of the actual projectile object coming out of the camera. Another thing to figure out is what kind of bullet you want behavior-wise, and the three most common ones I can think of are physics-based bullets, hit scan bullets, and what I call simulated hit scan bullets. The first option of physics-based bullets basically means that it's an entirely simulated physics object, meaning a rigid body in Unity, a chaos physics object in Unreal, or whatever other engine you may be using. This is obviously very nice, and it comes with a lot of perks and benefits, like being able to simulate with the world and have collision events and all that stuff, but it's also more expensive and sometimes gives you too much stuff that you don't necessarily need. A hit scan bullet's probably the most simplistic form, and it's essentially a raycast that happens instantaneously on the same frame that a player has clicked to shoot the gun, so it will give you that immediate feedback, and in most cases it doesn't simulate the bullet other than that one frame. Lastly, we have the simulated hit scan object, and this is essentially a combination between the two. You want to write a simple custom physics simulation using your own logic that is kind of just dealing with simple ballistics, meaning bullet drop, bullet velocity, maybe reflection, and things of that nature, where you only actually detect things with a raycast that are within the travel distance that it's going to travel next frame. This method strikes a nice balance between performance and the things that you can achieve with the system, as it's also very flexible since you're coding it on your own. It is the main system that's used in Nightmare Kitchen for most projectile types. However, pineapples, aka the grenade launcher, they are used using full physics-based objects, and when I get around to adding the sniper, I'll be using the full-on hit scan method. Each one of these methods has valid use cases and pros and cons that comes with them, and using them all together in conjunction with each other can combine for some really interesting guns and nice variety of different feel of weapons. The next thing I want to talk about is an optimization that any single bullet shooter needs to have. When firing bullets out of your gun, most modern engines will teach you to dynamically allocate it on the fly, meaning you ask your program for some memory after the program has already started to run. And when doing this infrequently, it's really not a big deal, but when it comes to shooting bullets over and over and over again, this can actually get quite expensive. The solution is actually quite simple, and it's a method called pooling, where you create some number of these objects beforehand during initialization time, and instead of actually allocating the memory at runtime, you simply enable and disable the objects and reset their states when you fire them. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is the concept of inherited velocity on the bullets for your guns. To explain this concept quickly, let's take a look at a stationary ship that shoots a bullet at 5 units per second upwards. Well, 1 second later, it's 5 units higher than it was. But in the situation where the ship is also moving 5 units per second to the left, and then it shoots the bullet 5 units per second up, you have a situation where if you include the velocity of the ship, the bullet will be in a different location now, also to the left along with its upwards translation. Well then, should you have it on or off? I mean, I think it depends on the game genre. For first-person shooters like Nightmare Kitchen, my intuition was to leave it on, and I was surprised to find out that I think it's worse to leave it on, with the main reason being that the reticle on screen or aiming down the sights that players normally use is all in the center of the camera. And when you have inherited velocity on, when strafing left and right, the reticle no longer accurately depicts where that shot's going to land, since it's also inheriting the movement of your character. Visually, it looks a little bit worse, but in terms of gameplay feel, you don't miss nearly as many shots, so for now, I'm leaving it off. Well, that does it for this week's Friday Feast. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was a little bit more educational this time around, so let me know how you like that. It was slightly less focused on my game and a little bit more focused on the game dev topic that I was talking about. I like doing both, but please just let me know in the comments how you liked it. And also, one thing I need you to do is if you celebrate Christmas, have a Merry Christmas, because next week I'll see you on the 27th. So enjoy the holidays, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.